But I keep growing and evolving and stepping more into my true self, my true purpose. And that's my mission for you. That's what I want for you, is to keep growing and evolving and get more and more comfortable being your true self, which you will only find by taking those steps, just starting and being consistent. This is the Energy Within podcast, all about accessing, nurturing, and building your energy and confidence so that you can get unstuck and design your life the way you want. My name is Carrie Jokala. I am your host. I am a Reiki master, a fitness instructor, a wife, a mom to 2 little boys, and this is episode 100, and I am so excited. If you can't tell, I'm so excited. I am sitting here in a room by myself. I have the house to myself, and I'm like, I don't want to, maybe butterflies, but I'm just like, I'm so excited because this is episode 100, and it's such a momentous achievement for so many reasons. First of all, I did know that I was going to get here. I knew that I was going to be consistent with this podcast. I told myself that from the start, that I was not going to be one of those people who started a podcast and then fell away from it, because I really, really wanted this to be part of what I do, because I love performing. I always loved being on the radio when I was in college, and that was part of why I felt like I would be good at podcasting. So here I am at episode 100. And of course, I need to thank all of you who listen to this podcast, because if nobody was listening, then yeah, I probably would have been one of the people who stopped podcasting, but I have you, and I'm grateful, very grateful, like I always say, for you. So thank you so much for being here on this journey, whether you've been here from the beginning, whether you joined when it switched over to being the Energy Within, or if you just found me today or in recent episodes. Thank you for being here. It's also, like I said, momentous because not a lot of people get to this point. Not a lot of people even get to episode 50. And here we are at 100 with many, many more to come. I've known a good handful of people who have started podcasts, and they were really good. Like I subscribed to them. I was listening to them weekly, and I'm like, hey, I know that person. And there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe other things took higher priority in their life, but this for me is a high priority. Now, while it took me a little while to get consistent, I wanted to release an episode once a week, every Wednesday, and I had a really hard time with that in the beginning. But once I came back around episode 10 or 11, I want to say, and it was the beginning of a new year, because I just had a baby in the middle of starting that podcast. So I did have other priorities at the time that kind of pushed me away from consistent recording. But one day I just decided, with the start of the new year, I don't care what it takes. I don't care if I have to hold my newborn baby on my lap, if I have to pause every now and then while he cries or screams, because he was a very whiny baby. I'm going to get this done. I'm going to do this. And I did. So I don't mean to sit here and just toot my own horn, because I know that's not what you want to listen to, but I'm just really proud of myself. So I wanted to share that. And that's actually going to be part of what I'm going to talk about today. So I'm not someone who typically batches content ahead of time. The only content I've ever really had ahead of time are my interviews, because the interviews get scheduled when they're able to be done, and then they still only get released one at a time. So some people we recorded and it was like, hey, you're going to be out next week, or you're going to be out in 2 weeks. And other people, I'm like, it might be a month and a half. So it just depended on when the recordings happened, but I always had something to edit. But when I do my solo episodes, with the exception of the last 2 that I did, I'm typically recording as I go. Now, a lot of people who podcast recommend batching content, especially for people who have kids like me. But it's just not an option for me. One, I have to feel it. I am not good at faking. So if I'm not really feeling the topic that I'm trying to talk about, I'm not going to record an entire episode on it. So even there have been times when I've started and I'm just like, this isn't working. And I've scrapped the whole thing and started over. Either I had a better focus with the topic when I went back to record, or I just switched up what I was talking about completely. I have to feel it, so it's got to be sort of in the moment. I can't record something that I'm going to put out 3 weeks later when it's just me. And that's just me. I also have limited time with the kids. Even when I'm without the kids, I still have limited time. So I don't really have the option to sit here and batch content. So anyway, that is why it was only a few days before recording this that I realized that, oh yeah, I knew it was coming up. I knew it was here because I just released episode 99. I'm like, oh, this week is episode 100. What am I doing for it? So I posted on social media, asked for some suggestions, and I got a couple really good ones, and I actually just ended up combining them. So while part of me really wanted to keep this energy, Reiki, manifestation related, this topic kind of is, but isn't. I feel like it is because in all ways, I feel like this always ties in. But really kind of the main focus here is going to be on that part that I say in the intro about designing your life the way that you want, getting yourself unstuck. So these lessons learned from starting this podcast that I'm going to share are going to be things that I hope that you can take and put to use in your life in ways that make sense for you, that will help you to get moving and get unstuck, which is all about moving your energy. So the initial suggestion for this was, because it's episode 100 lessons learned, but that would take a really long time. And I'm not even sure that I have 100 lessons that I've learned. Maybe I have, but broke it down to 10 lessons learned, and I came up with 8. Not that I don't think I've learned plenty of lessons, but some of them aren't relevant. For example, learning how to edit my podcast. Yeah, that was a lesson learned, but that's not a point that I think needs to be talked about beyond that. But for me, I'm also, in case you have not picked up on this, I tend to think in very broad terms, very big picture. I can be detail oriented because I'm a Virgo, but as far as when I talk about things, when I dream about things, I'll get a topic, and then in my mind, everything that fits under that topic gets sorted under there. So you could probably break some of these down into other lessons, but for me, it felt like I would be repeating. So are you still with me? I feel like I'm babbling. Let's get started. So these are in no particular order whatsoever, except for the last one, which is deliberately the last one. So the first one is to just start. And you've probably heard me say this before. You've likely heard other people say this. I hear my mentors say this all the time. Just start. Start messy. Start sucky. Your first draft is going to be horrible, but do it anyway. And especially if it's something like a podcast or a social media post or something to do with your business or your career that's going to be you putting yourself out there, you need to include that step. So whatever it is that you're creating, create it, but then you got to share it too. That's the extra part within just start. When I started the podcast, it was called Rockstar Confidence because my focus was confidence. I thought that my path was going to wind up me being a confidence coach, aka some sort of a life coach, but focusing on confidence. And I did do a little bit of that for a while. But while I knew I had a lot to talk about in regards to confidence, and I could still talk about it, it still weaves itself in here. It's still a very big part of the energy within, because building your energy, raising your vibration, brings confidence along with it. It changes your confidence. Changing your confidence changes your vibration. So it works hand in hand. But the main focus at the time, because I had not started learning Reiki yet, was just confidence. And again, while I knew I had a lot that I could talk about, I didn't really know where I was going to take it. I didn't know what the topic was going to be ahead of time every week. I still kind of don't know because like I said, I kind of do it well, I guess you could say on the fly, but it was just such a broad umbrella. It was too broad almost. But if I hadn't started there, I wouldn't have been able to get to the point that I'm at now. I still feel like I could probably niche down a little bit better, but I do have a stronger focus. I know what the end goal is. I know where I'm taking you. Whereas before it was just kind of all over the place, but I had to start there so I could get it sorted out. If you just sit there and keep thinking about it and trying to plan it out, you can plan it out all you want. But if you don't start, you're never going to be able to actually see where it's going so that you can make the tweaks that need to be made. Lesson number 2 is consistency. The podcast was the first thing that I have been crazy consistent about from the moment I decided that no matter what, I was going to be consistent. I gave myself this deadline, and it's really hard for me to stick to my own deadlines outside of this podcast. It really is. And I unfortunately attribute it to some random day when I was younger, much younger, maybe junior high, high school-ish. And I don't know what prompted it, but I had tried to set a deadline for myself with doing workouts and just trying to get fit. And I realized on my calendar that the deadline was coming up and I hadn't done very much and I was nowhere near where I wanted to be. And I realized, oh, well, my own deadline, this isn't like in school where if I don't turn my homework in on time, I'm not going to get in trouble. Cool. All right. But then that started this realization that I don't have to stick to my own deadlines. And I wish I hadn't had that realization because I used to be really good about it. And I can be really good about other people's deadlines, but for some reason I have trouble sticking to my own. But the podcast proved to me that I can stick to my own deadlines when I really dedicate myself and stay focused. The other thing to talk about with consistency is if you are someone who is trying to build a brand, build a business, you're using social media, consistency is super important. And you've probably heard that. If you're like me, you hate hearing that because you might have trouble being consistent. Or you might be like I used to be, where I was thinking that I was consistent with stuff, but looking back, I really wasn't consistent enough because sometimes we think or we worry that we're showing up too much, that we're going to be annoying. How can I keep talking about the same thing all the time? You realize that not everybody sees every post. Not everybody, even if they see the post, they necessarily don't read the post. And some people might read the post, but it doesn't really register that it's also what you do. For example, when I was a Beachbody coach, which was one of the many things that I attempted in trying to build my own thing, I thought I was being consistent. And at one point I kind of was because it was all I was posting about, but it wasn't in a very relatable or conversational way. And it reached a point where even for me, it wasn't fun anymore because I realized I wasn't inserting any of myself into it. But that being said, probably because I was posting non-personal, non-relatable, unrelatable posts, they kind of became white noise. And even if people were seeing them, they weren't paying attention to them. And therefore, they didn't catch on that you could buy Beachbody programs from me as a coach. And I saw so many people that I was friends with, they would suddenly be posting like, hey, I just bought this program, or I just bought this program, or people would ask me questions about the programs and then go buy them direct from Beachbody instead of from me. So I didn't realize what was missing there. And I think part of it may have been that I wasn't being fun about it. I wasn't being myself. injecting any personality. I wasn't making it a conversation. I was just promoting and putting posts out there. That was consistent, but it wasn't an interesting or helpful consistent. So people didn't pick up on the fact that they could buy these things from me. Or if I was being consistent, it was just motivational quotes or random things like that, trying to ask questions and get conversations going, but nothing that ever really tied itself back to, hey, this is what I do, this is what I can help you with. So people never made the connection. So then I keep hearing from my mentors as I'm narrowing down what it is that I do, and even as I've found Reiki, pick one thing, be consistent about it, and that it can take 6 to 12 months to build up the brand to a point where people recognize that this is what you do and that you are the person to go to for it. And that seems really long, really frustrating to hear, especially when in the beginning you can be posting and there can be crickets and you are being consistent and it's still crickets. You got to keep going. Like Angie Lee says, even when it's just your mom and one other person showing up and clapping for you, can you keep going? Because if you can, and you can hit that 6 to 12 month mark, then things can really start rolling for you. And I am right in the middle of that. I'm right in the sweet spot. And I'm telling you, I am seeing the results. Like, I'm not a millionaire all of a sudden, but the ball is really rolling now. Like, seriously rolling. And it's so cool to see what's transpired from being consistent with this one thing, talking about it all the time in all the different ways that I can think of, and just having that consistency. I know I had heard that when I got certified as a group exercise instructor, that it can take up to at least 6 months in some cases to build up a consistent class of regulars. And while that seems also frustrating, you go into that, or I went into that knowing that, okay, there's this threshold and I got to keep going. And I want to keep going. I want this to be a lifetime thing. So what's 6 months in the span of a lifetime? But then translating that to trying to build a business, build a brand, build a whole thing, it gets frustrating. But if you can stick with it, I promise you, the results will start to come. I promise you. So if you're in that situation where you're struggling, where you're worried, even if it's been longer than that, but you know that you're on the right path, keep going. Please keep going. Please be consistent. Please keep showing up even when it seems like no one's watching. Because you've heard me say this in previous episodes. I think I talked about this with Jess in our episode. You might think people aren't watching, but they are. Because I get so many messages, or even people approaching me in person who they never interact with my posts, but then they'll say something about how my posts really help them, or this one particular one that they'll describe, and I really like this, and I watched this video. So people are watching. They're just not always interacting. So keep showing up. I have found that a lot of times it's the people who aren't really interacting that much who are the people who are going to want your services. So keep going. I know I spent a lot of time on that one, but that was a really, really big key for me in keeping this podcast going and growing my brand. So I hope that no matter what it is that you want to do, whether you're building a business or not, whatever it is you want to do with your life, keep going, keep that consistency. Number 3 is just to be yourself. Now, I've always known this. I've always tried to be myself. I've always tried to be authentic. But of course, if you go back and you listen to some of my early episodes, you'll hear my story. You'll know that I struggled with confidence for a long time growing up. I still have times when I struggle with it, even now. But that's because confidence is a fluid journey. There is no end goal. There's no final level where you're going to beat the boss and win a trophy and you are uber confident and you'll never not be confident again. It just doesn't work like that. Even as you level up, you're going to get knocked down a little bit here and there, but it's how quickly can you get back up without pretending that nothing's wrong. You don't want to bring all of that with you. You want to process it, work through it, and then get back to your level. But you know that you've progressed when you can catch yourself and turn it around quicker. So it's been a journey for me to find my true self all the way. I've always been myself as the person that I've been at each level, if that makes sense. But I keep growing and evolving and stepping more into my true self, my true purpose. And that's my mission for you. That's what I want for you, is to keep growing and evolving and get more and more comfortable being your true self, which you will only find by taking those steps, just starting and being consistent. And you can tell me, maybe don't tell me, I don't know. I haven't gone back and listened to any of my early episodes, but I know that I felt when I was editing them, I felt like maybe I was a little stiff. Like as I was recording it, I thought that I was being energetic and exciting and having, inflections in my voice and really being myself. But I don't know, it just seemed kind of stiff. And I'd listen to it and be like, that wasn't what I thought I sounded like. But I edited them. I put them out anyway because that's the only way that you learn and grow and get better. And then I realized I'm really not being my true self. Like you would come take a class with me, a group exercise class, and I'll be bouncing off the walls, telling bad jokes, talking in movie quotes, and I wasn't inserting any of that into the podcast. So as I've gotten more comfortable, and especially as I found more of my direction with all the energy work, it's just been easier to relax a little bit with it and allow all of that to come through as it comes through. Number 4 is learning that it's okay to pivot. You can only pivot after you've started. So you do have to start there. Maybe these are in order. Unintentionally, maybe they are in order. But again, I remind you how this was rock star confidence in the beginning. And then as I found Reiki and I realized that the through line between everything that I was doing, because I was also doing the virtual fitness classes at the time, between the energy work and the meditation and the fitness, energy itself on all levels was the through line. So I realized that I needed to not necessarily change the podcast, although the exact topics that I would be talking about changed a little bit. The overall message hadn't, but there needed to be a little bit of a rebrand. So early this year is when it switched over to the energy within. And that's when I really started to understand what it actually means to pivot. Because when people say just start, and some people are like, but I don't know, I can't choose. I have like 8 million things I want to do. Just pick something, honestly, just pick something. I'm the same way. Because I was like, how do I blend all of this together? I have no idea. I don't even know where I'm headed with this. But you need to just put one toe out there and just get started. Because if I hadn't started the podcast, if I hadn't started the Facebook group, if I hadn't started to be consistent with the podcast, I wouldn't have had enough of the base that I already had to make a smooth transition through this pivot. Maybe it would have still worked out okay without all of that, but maybe my confidence level in doing the podcast would have been a little bit different. Who knows? But I know that I felt much more confident and that everything was smooth in that transition because I already had that base. So all I needed to do really was change the name of the podcast, change the artwork, and then just keep going with my topics. But just while it was clear that there was a switch over, there was a little more talk about Reiki and the specific energy work and things that come along with that. Confidence, being yourself, living your life the way you want, have always been a part of the message. But I wasn't scared to make that pivot. So if you really get started, you stay consistent, and you realize that something needs to be tweaked, it's so much easier to keep going and change that path a little bit without much disruption. Number 5 is just ask. Whatever it is that you want to do, that you think you need help with, just ask. My big example for this is after I had started doing a group of interviews the first time, again, back when it was Rockstar Confidence, and I had maybe 10 people or so that I found in a Facebook group that I was in. I think it was the Don't Keep Your Day Job Facebook group. And I had become more comfortable with doing interviews from doing that. I decided I wanted to reach a little bit bigger. And I came up with a list of people that I wanted to interview. And there are a couple on that list that I have not had the opportunity yet, but I plan to continue reaching out again. And hopefully I can still get those people. But one person who I really didn't even think would say yes, said yes on the same day that I emailed him. And that was Nick Stellino. If you don't know who Nick Stellino is, he is a chef on PBS, and he has had multiple different shows over about 20 years or so. He came over from Italy when he was a teenager, and he just has the most awesome personality. So he really fit in with the idea of confidence for me. He's always showing off what he cooked in the episode and like really praising himself, but not in, it doesn't come across in a conceited way. It's in a funny way. Like, look how amazing I am. That's beautiful. Like, I can't say it the way he does. I don't even know if he says those exact phrases, but it's that kind of feeling that comes along with it. And so I thought it would be really fun to have him on the podcast. And I went to his website, I found the contact form, and I was about to fill it out. And then it almost looked like, you got to pay him for his appearances and things like that. I'm like, I don't know, he probably charges a lot, and I don't know if I want to do that for the podcast. And so I didn't do it, but I kept thinking about it. So maybe a day or two later, I went back and I just filled it out. And later that same day, he replied back and said, let's do it. And it took a couple months to get it scheduled, because he actually ended up having to have dental surgery the day before we were supposed to do the interview. But we got it rescheduled, and it was one of the most fun interviews I've ever done. I didn't get much opportunity to talk because he actually answered a lot of my questions as he told his story. But it was okay, because that's another reason why my husband and I were drawn to a show in the beginning. He's an amazing storyteller. So I had no problem just sitting back and letting him go and tell his story. So that episode is still up. I can't remember what number it is, but you'll find it in there. It'll say Nick Stellino. And just grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine or something with that one, sit back and enjoy. That one was a lot of fun. But here's the thing. Again, if I didn't ask, of course he wouldn't have been on the podcast. It's not like he would have sought me out to be on my podcast. I just took the chance, just sent him a nice email, and that was all it took. That's all you need to do, is just ask. The worst they can say is no, and then you move on. Number 6 is to really, truly just be of service. And I say that with a tiny bit of worry, just because I don't want anyone to think that I was ever not of service, or that was ever not my intention. But to be honest, when I wasn't really on my true path, the one that I'm on now, while I really have always wanted to help people, and that was always the main basic motivator, I think that's why there was always a little bit of desperation coming into my energy. And even in the beginning of this journey, and sometimes even a little bit still now, but it's getting less and less, there was always that, like, come on, we got to try harder. We got to make something happen. We got to start making some money, start, selling some programs or some oils or whatever it's been that I was selling. And then when it wasn't happening, more and more desperation would come. And then that would be, unfortunately, clouding the lens of how I crafted anything that I posted or created, ebooks that I made, or videos that I tried to do. I don't know if people picked up on that, or that they would say that back to me. They're like, oh, you seem kind of desperate in that video. But I know for me, looking back and recognizing in recent months how I was feeling and why maybe I was blocking myself from moving forward, was because of that little hint of desperation. But I've always heard that before, that You really just need to come at things from a place of service. And I would always be feeling like, but I am. But there was always just that little hint of desperation that was holding it back just enough that it was clouding the message, clouding the intention. And for me, again, finding my path, settling a little bit more into my authentic, true self, not being stressed, not being worried, and just starting to share. Really simply sharing with no ulterior motive behind it of, please buy my stuff. It has made things so much easier, much more flow. I only get the little hint of desperation in there once in a while, and I try to realize that and pull it back because I'm just anxious and I want everything to grow like super fast and really explode. So I'm getting better at recognizing that, but I know that that's what changed a lot of things for me. Like, for example, when I just started doing group Reiki in my Facebook group for free, obviously, that's what really got a lot of the ball rolling for me. Doing the live card pulls, things like that, where people could experience and share in what I do to just get a taste of it, knowing that there's more steps that they could take if they want more detail, they want more help. But if you want to just stay here and participate when I'm able to show up in the free group, please be my guest. So, could you hear in my voice even how that changed my energy, knowing that there's just a basis of wanting to be of service, wanting to help people. And if you want to continue working with me more directly, then I'm here for that. Because then for me, there's a level of trust in myself and in my path that if I just continue being of service and nothing else, that it'll actually bring everything else along with it. Number 7 is to stop expecting perfection, which is really hard for me because I'm a Virgo. I've always been a perfectionist. I do feel like I've loosened up overall as I've gotten older, which is good because, for example, when I was little, my knickknacks and everything else in my room would have a specific spot, and literally I could tell if someone moved something like a quarter inch. And sometimes my sisters would do that to me just to see how long it would take me to realize, and I was not a fan of that. Still not, FYI, but at least for right now, things are not like that. Mostly because I think I don't really have a lot of spaces to put things at the moment. But I'm hoping that this relaxed energy about how my things are will continue even as we move on and hopefully get a new house at some point in the future, hopefully sooner rather than later. But you know what? And having kids has helped with that too, because you just can't. Things can't have a place. They can have an area, but they can't have a place because it's just not going to work. But anyway, if we relate this to what you're trying to create, what you want to do with your life, what you want to put out there, who you want to be, you cannot expect perfection out of yourself. Angie Lee, who I mentioned before, if you don't follow her on Instagram or listen to her podcast, you need to. But I know she's done a poll, I think a couple of different times, trying to help people realize that perfection is unnecessary, especially on social media, despite the fact that there's all the filters that you can use and people trying to craft these perfect posts and stories, that it's just better if you can just show up as yourself, just really being authentic, going back to that being yourself idea. But what she did in this poll is first asked, what do you hate most on social media? And while there were a lot of things, the top answer was seeing perfect people with their perfect posts and their perfect feeds and their perfect life. And, the ones who have young kids, but they have white furniture and they're all wearing white clothes and everybody's clean and everybody's happy and everybody smiled for the picture. But we already know that's not reality. We know that, first of all, that may not be your house. Second of all, if it is, something's either photoshopped to cover up a stain or you did a lot of cleaning beforehand. And we also know that you probably didn't get that nice smiling picture with everybody looking at the camera in one shot. And that right before and right after, it was probably chaos and everybody was really mad at each other. And then the nice happy picture is the one that got posted on social media. Now, I am totally in favor of putting your best foot forward and being your best possible self on social media, but that doesn't mean being inauthentic. And that's the consensus. People don't like seeing these people who supposedly have everything figured out and everything is so perfect. They want to see human beings, other people like ourselves. We want to know that we're not alone. But then on the flip side, the question was something along the lines of, why don't you show up as often as you'd like to or as often as you know you should on social media? And it wasn't these exact words, but everything really boiled down to this idea of needing to be perfect when we show up. Because when it comes to ourselves, we get into that mindset of the house has to be clean, I have to have my makeup on and my hair done, and the kids can't be screaming and whatever. So then we prevent ourselves from showing up. And I know that I've had a little bit of that myself. Like, I have never tried to pretend or act like everything is perfect or that I have all of my stuff together, because I don't. But I really did have an issue when JJ was really little and there was constant screaming. And it wasn't just, a couple kids screaming in the background while they're playing. It was screaming that nobody wants to hear. And you couldn't even hear anybody over it anyway because it was so loud and screechy, and it was hard. Let's just say it was hard. You wouldn't recognize him today. He still has his moments, of course, but he is a completely different baby. He's not really a baby. He just turned 2, but he's still a baby to me. Teddy's still a baby to me when he's 4. He's going to start 4K in the fall. But anyway, I digress. Once we got through that, it became easier for me to just start showing up, not caring about the redness in my face. If I wanted to do a story really quick, I would, make my hair look somewhat presentable, but I wouldn't worry about whether or not I had makeup on, if I was wearing my glasses versus my contacts. If the kids did scream momentarily, I just kept going with it. If it became an issue and it was something where someone really needed some attention, I would stop and then worry about doing the story later, of course. But, if they popped their heads in or someone said something, you keep going. You acknowledge I acknowledge my kids and then keep going with the story, because that's real life. So don't worry about being perfect as you show up, because people don't want to see that. If you're honest with yourself, you don't want to see that. So why expect it out of yourself? And I don't mean just on social media. I just mean in general with, again, whatever it is that you want to do with your life. Do not expect yourself to be perfect. Don't expect yourself to have it all figured out and all together before you even start. Go back to the beginning and just start. Be yourself, but just start. Number 10, and thank you for being with me. Did I say number 10? Oh my God. You know why? Because on my list, maybe I'll post a picture later. So I wrote out 1 through 10 on my paper, and I put this last one in the number 10 spot because I wanted it to be the last one. And then I went back and I started filling everything else in. But if you remember, I told you I only came up with 8. So I looked at my notes and I saw a 10. So I said, number 10. Number 8. Celebrate your wins, celebrate your progress, and express gratitude daily. I'm still working on this. I need to especially get better at a daily gratitude practice. I make sure that I'm tuning in and expressing gratitude as often as I can, but I have not made it a daily thing, and I need to do that. But I can tell you that when you do take a look and figure out all of the little wins that you've had, everything doesn't have to be this big, ginormous milestone. Every little win needs to be celebrated and there needs to be gratitude. So I've made it a point to acknowledge and celebrate anytime I get a message where someone's thanking me for even one of those free group Reiki sessions that I did, where they had an amazing experience and they wanted to share with me what they saw, even what happened in the weeks afterward. I also recently, finally, got together the process to do card readings, the Oracle card readings by email. And I sold 2 in the first day and a total of 4 in the first week. And I tell you completely honestly, I was not expecting that at all. So I got to make it a point to celebrate. If I'm honest, I knew that it was something that people would do and that people would be interested in, but I figured it would be something that maybe I'd have to talk about it a few times, remind people that it's something that I offer, and maybe a few would come in here and there. And that would be okay too. But I posted about it one time. I mentioned it in a video. I don't think I had even actually made a written post about it. And within the first hour, someone bought one. And it was amazing. And everyone's being blown away by the results of their card readings. So if I can insert a little ad for you right here, I'll tell you more at the end of this what the card readings are. But if you think that that's something that you'd like to do, I'll try to get some of the feedback up as testimonials so that you can take a look at that too. But the link is in the show notes if you want to book one of those. But yeah, that was just so cool to me because I just mentioned it. And all of a sudden, people were partaking and it was awesome. I also, at that same point, announced a contest, which did not get announced on the podcast because I announced it after I recorded the podcast. But I did a contest to try to help increase the numbers in the group a little bit. We had just hit 300, which was amazing. So I wanted to celebrate. So I ran a little contest and gave away a free Reiki session and a free Oracle card spread. And I couldn't believe the response. So many people partook in the contest, inviting their friends into the group. People actually joined the group. And we're over 350 now because of that effort. So just make sure that whatever milestone you hit, no matter how small it is, please take the time to acknowledge it, be grateful for it, celebrate it, even if it seems small in comparison to what other people might be doing. So, I see people all the time like, oh, check out how I grew my group to 5,000 people in 2 months. It's like, well, good for you. I am happy for you, but that's just, I'm growing slowly and organically, and I am perfectly okay with that. There is a part of me, yes, I would love for things to explode. But I need to remember the patience message that I keep getting from God and the universe. Continue to be of service, keep any desperation out of my energy, trusting that I am on the right path. I know that I'm on the right path, that I am helping people, and that things are going to happen as they're meant to happen. So this turned into a little bit of a longer podcast than I was expecting. So maybe it's good that I only got 8 instead of 10 lessons. But thank you so much for being with me on this journey. If you found this episode helpful, if you found any of these tips personally relevant, please share it. Please take a screenshot or even do a screen flow, share it to your social media, tag me, and let me know what stuck out for you. Of course, I would love for you to come do a Reiki session with me. This is where we're really getting people unstuck, figuring out where the blockages are, what's holding you back, what you can work on to help you move forward. And if you're not sure what Reiki is, or you're a little hesitant, please, first of all, ask me any questions that you have, but you can also go to the website, check out the testimonials. You can hop into the Facebook group and do some of the group Reiki that's in there. You'll find those in the announcements at the top of the group. You can also listen to a podcast episode that I recorded a while back called What is Reiki? You'll see the title there. But let's really do some actionable work to get you moving forward. If you just want to dip a toe in the water or you have a specific question you would like answered, first of all, I'd like you to know that I always include an oracle card pull with a Reiki session. I don't always do a full spread unless I'm feeling called to, but you do get usually at least a couple of cards. Sometimes just one if it feels right, but you do get an oracle card pull with your Reiki session. But if all you want is that oracle card pull, you have a couple options. The link is in the bio that will take you to where you can look at both options and select the one you want. The first is a 3 card, which tells you where you were, where you are, and where you're headed. But everyone is choosing the 8 card pull. And I don't know if I'm going to get to fix this by time this episode is out, but just in case, it might say 7 card because I can't do math. So when I first put it up, I thought it was 7 cards, but it's actually 8. But if it still says 7, that's the one that gets you the 8 card spread. So that one gives you 4 cards that tell you where you are, 3 cards that tell you the path that you're on, and 1 to possibly 2, if I need a clarifier, that tell you the outcome if you stay on that path. So if you have any questions about that as well, please let me know. If you're not already in the Facebook group, please jump in there. Share with me any of your feedback. Go and participate in some of that group Reiki because time is not linear, so you can still receive. Thank you so much, as always, for being here. Thank you for being with me on this journey to 100 episode. Here's to many more. I will see you next time. Thank you.